For the past 5 years, one driver and one marque have been the dominant names on the Formula One circuit: Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. Together, they are far and away the most successful driver and factory combination in Grand Prix history. But for Ferrari, Schumacher is yet another name in a long line of champions, men who were fortunate enough to race in some of the finest examples of automotive excellence. Ferrari, the essence of automotive passion, captures the hearts of all who appreciate the art of power and speed. Ferrari's extraordinary heritage, this year celebrating its 50th year in America, is once again the honored marque at the annual Celebration of Motorsports, the 31st Monterey Historic Automobile Races. Once again, one of America's greatest road courses, Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in California, plays host to the Monterey Historic Automobile Races. Hello everyone, I'm Bob Varsha. It's Ferrari time in the hills above Carmel and the Pacific Coast. Let's meet my colleague, Mike Joy.
The mid-60s were the transition point in GT racing from front-engine to mid-engine cars. Ferrari's last and perhaps greatest front-engine GT success, the 250 GTO, built over a period of 1962 to 63. Less than 40 examples were ever built, and more than 20 of them are here, including its predecessor, the 250 short wheelbase. This is going to be a great field of cars. Now let's go across the paddock and join my Speed Channel colleague and friend, Alan de Cadenet.
Thank you, Mike, and it is so good to have you with us here at this year's Monterey Historics. Now, I'm not surprised that you're surrounded by Ferraris after all. You've only been here for 50 years. Come and see what I found, though. This is a 1904 Fiat 100-year-old car. Look at the size of that motor, 6-inch bore and 6-inch stroke, giving 10.5 litres. And that's the magneto down there, automatic advance. 75 horsepower in this baby, and typical of Monterey, this wonderful car is going to go out and race, and I cannot wait to see her run.
I'm with you there, Alan. More than 400 cars on hand, and we're going to see some great ones on track, such as number 10 right there, a 1952 Ferrari 340 Mexico, which ran in the great Carrera Panamericana. How about Testarossas, perhaps the name that springs to mind immediately when you think of Ferraris, the signature car of Monza. And there's so much more. How about the great Grand Prix cars, such as number 6, a 1969 Ferrari 312 F1. And of course, when you think of Ferrari, you think of the great sports prototypes, and there are plenty on hand. Nearly 100 of the 400 entries in this year's races are Ferrari branded. We'll be featuring 4 of the races this weekend, and of course, highlighting everything that goes on through the weekend. Right now, we're about ready for our first full race coverage, the 1947 to 1957 sports racing cars over 2.5 liters. But first, let's catch up with the oldest cars on the property, the pre-1931 sports and touring machinery.
Look at the spread of the age range of these cars. You'll expect a great speed disparity here because the whole auto industry technically progressed so far since the time when the first and the last of these cars were built.
Taking the early lead, John Voveril in his 1924 Ford Barber Warnock, chased by number 191. Look at the difference in size between these cars. That's David Swig in a 1931 Chrysler CD8 LM, followed by the 71 of Rodney Smith and a 30 Riley Brooklyns. Meanwhile, running 19th, the way race cars used to be, a driver and a riding mechanic. This is Morris Kindig.
This is a 1917 Overland manufactured in the Midwest before the States got into the First World War. No front-wheel brakes on there, you'll notice. And in fact, this is a replica body because the original Type 90 rotted away because the car stood for 30 years in the field. But just have a look under there, will you? That is one of the world's first transaxles, a gearbox bolted to the differential. They got a little picnic box on the back there because these guys used to race for 3 or 4 days and they certainly didn't want to go hungry. Contracting shoe and expanding shoe rear brakes, and note that rear suspension. I've never seen anything like that before. But 1917, a transaxle? I wonder if Mr. Ferrari didn't get a few bright ideas from this car.
We've come so far in 100 years of building automobiles, and yet some of the ideas have been around a long time.
There he is, proudly racing here at Laguna Seca. Coming toward the end of the race, it was still John Voveril in the number 27.
And look at him work traffic, Bob.
Yeah.
Right around 2 cars around the outside, little spindly tires. There he goes, checkered flag.
Passing David Willis in a 1916 Model T, and happy to pick up the victory. Here are the final results. Voberil over George Chilberg in his 1933 MGL1, who came up for second, and former Chrysler engineering chief Francois Castang in his 31 Chrysler CM6 finished fourth. We'll be back in a moment with the 1947 to 57 sports racing cars over 2.5 liter when we return to Monterey. Coverage of the 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races presented by Chrysler is being brought to you by BMW, the ultimate driving machine. And by Hagerty Insurance, Hagerty Collector Car Insurance.
Welcome back to Monterey with Alan DeCatney and Bob Varsha. I'm Mike Joy. I walked through the Ferrari corral and the paddock and stopped counting Ferraris at 400. And many of the owners of these street machines got a chance to take a ceremonial lap around the track.
What a thrill for them as we move on to a look at one of the other races this weekend. This for 1947 to 57 sports racing cars over 2,500 cc's. And plenty of Ferraris in this group, including a 1953 Ferrari 250 Mille.
That car, number 5, driven by Pablo Gonzalez, one of the few street-produced cars in this race. Most of these cars were racing specials, but some, like the Allard number 1, was a car that was built for you to drive on the street or take to the track.
And of course, Ferrari began life on the racetrack. Enzo Ferrari, the legends tell us, had to be convinced to build street cars.
It's a great chicken and egg story, Ferrari coming to America. Did Canetti first say, "I will sell them if you build them," or did Ferrari first say, "I will build them if you can sell them"?
Was Luigi Canetti a big part of the Ferrari legend? And his memory very much with us this weekend here at Laguna Seca.
The lines of the Ferrari were very contemporary for its day. Compare it to the silver Allard, which was all business. There's not a wasted piece of sheet metal on that Allard. It was built for speed. The Ferrari was built for dual road and track capability.
Just take a look at this gorgeous 1953 Ferrari 250 Mille that competed in the Carrera Panamericana road race in Mexico, driven by its pilot, Echevarria. Now, there's a very interesting story behind this car because Echevarria had a 212 that he crashed so badly he sent it back to the Ferrari factory. Mr. Ferrari managed to convince him not to repair that car, but to buy this brand new car, which was then stamped with the same chassis number as the original 212, so it could get back into Mexico without paying customs duty. Number 123 was not the car's number in the race, of course. It's a cooking oil, and no hay dos. That means second to none, just like the car itself.
Thanks, Alan. Some things never change in motorsports. And watching the battle on the racetrack here, the number 22 right there, Phil Hill, America's first Formula One world champion in 1961, driving a 53 Alfa Romeo 6C 3000 CM, followed by the 21, Rick Hall, in a 54 Ferrari 2000 Monza, and the number 6, Lou Sellier, in a 1955 Jaguar D-Type. What a great mix of cars, and that's Hill getting off and on.
Phil, this Alfa 6C is a car that's now half a century old. What are these cars like to drive?
I've been an Alfa fan for years. I had my first one in 1951, and this one is a real goer. It's the car that Fangio drove, very physical, much different than what today's drivers would be used to.
Now, Sellier's Jag should have the measure of Phil Hill here. It's got a larger displacement engine, more power, much lower center of gravity, better aerodynamics. This was a purpose-built race car built to win Le Mans.
And that's just what it did. But getting back to Phil Hill for a moment, he makes a good point. These cars were very, very physical to drive in the days before power steering, which is why so many of the great drivers of that era were fairly burly individuals. See if the Jag can make the move up the inside. Yes, he does.
Cubic inches, horsepower, advantage.
Meanwhile, about to take the checkered flag, number 17, Nick Foray, driving a 55 Jaguar D-Type. He led the entire way. Took the checker after laying a lap on the number 15, driven by Ed Davies, a 56 Ferrari 290 Millimiglia in 12th.
You see some of these cars with and some without the big fin behind the driver. It was for stability on the long Mulsanne straight at Le Mans.
To the checkered flag goes Nick. And Phil Hill, he finished in 7th. Still driving that car that demands so much physical effort. Good to see Phil at the racetrack. Final results in the class: Foray over James Lustman's 52 Jag C-Type. Rick Hall finished 3rd in a Ferrari 250 Monza.
Our next race was for 1927 through 1946, racing cars and Indy roadsters, the pre-World War II cars. Again, a wide variety of technologies here, but they all have one thing in common, Bob. They're all purpose-built race cars.
A couple of names familiar to fans of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a Miller and a Curtis out there.
From the pole, Peter Giddings' Red Alpha took the lead. The Ferrari shield on the hood because Ferrari started his career as team manager for Alfa Romeo.
Also in that race, we found the number 9, Brian Mullen, driving his 1936 Delahaye 135 back in 18th. Note that the number 29 was only moments away from lapping him. That's the nature of the racing here at the Monterey Historic Races. Some guys get after it. Some guys are just happy to be here.
This 1936 Delahaye is both representative of the period and something special. Beautifully turned out in French racing blue, big rear-mounted tank with a quick fill, and this nice little splitter down the middle. This car sits on a very robust frame, big leaf springs, big drum brakes, a huge wheel for leverage, a tiny screen, a second lever underneath to help engage reverse. This car is greatly, beautifully restored with one detail. These front fenders are just as the car came off the track after winning the 1938 24 Hours of Le Mans. The front end equally robust, big friction shocks, huge axle, leaf springs, but I think all that's surpassed by the styling. The Delahaye is one of the most beautiful competition cars of the period.
No question about it. And note the bracing for those front bicycle fenders as well. A real piece of craftsmanship, hand built. And Brian Mullen having fun with it. Meanwhile, there's the number 117 of Mark Gillis in 1934 ERA, who went on to take the checkered flag.
And that was an inspired drive. Mark Gillis really slid this car around the course to the delight of the crowd.
In case you're wondering, yes, you can get tires for these cars. Final result, Gillis over Rob Walton in his 1940 Maserati 8CL. Great to see the Roadsters back on track. Coming up, the over 2.5-liter sports cars from 57 to 62.
In Nevada, all roads lead to adventure, but you still need a guide. Not that guide.
This guide.
Your all-in-one multi-tool for taking on the silver stage, where the possibilities are wide open. Call 1-800-370-2816 right now and get the Nevada Adventure Guide, plus the Nevada Visitor's Guide free.
Awesome.
Tonight on Wind Tunnel, immediately after their test at Lowe's Motor Speedway, driver Jimmy Johnson, crew chief Chad Knaus on the chase for the championship, and Elio Castro Neves. What's up with Elio? He's due for a win. 10 Eastern on Speed.
Stop. This one. A couple papers, mails in a mailbox.
Yeah. Give me the package.
They think the signs read, "No one is home."
Mom, what's going on?
Yet they missed the most important sign of all.
It's okay. It's okay. Hello? It springs. It's okay.
Brinks Home Security protected this family, and they can help protect yours, too. The Brinks award-winning monitoring center provides a quick link to the proper authorities 24 hours a day. And the Brinks Standard System is a Consumer's Digest Best Buy. Call Brinks Home Security now and get a free home security analysis, the Brinks Standard System installed for just $99, and we'll also install a second keypad free. That's a $125 value. Plus, you could save up to 20% on your homeowner's insurance. You'll always feel safe at home with Brinks Home Security. Brinks Home Security, dedicated to fast response and peace of mind 24 hours a day. Call now.
At At the 31st Annual Monterey Historic Automobile Races, Rolex presents this moment in time.
1954, Donald Healey knows that speed sells in America. The Healey factory built 55 100S models to commemorate Sterling Moss's third-place finish in the 12 Hours of Sebring. Later run at Bonneville, they achieve 132 miles an hour over 24 hours. This car finished 15th at Sebring. We salute the 50th anniversary of the introduction of the Austin Healey 100S.
Always plenty of anniversaries to be celebrated at the Monterey Historic Automobile Races. Of course, this year, for the third time in the 31-year history of this great event, it is Ferrari that is the honored Marque. Now rolling off the 1957 to 1962 sports racing cars over 2.5 liters, including Ferrari, Maserati, Lister, Jaguar, and more.
Every year I come to the Monterey Historics, I know there's going to be something very, very special just for me. This year, it's this awesome Alfa Romeo. It's a 1935 8C35 Grand Prix car, made famous by the legendary Tazio Nuvolari and his racing partner, Rennie Dreyfus. Underneath the bonnet there's a wonderful straight 8 3.8 litre twin overhead cam engine, twin superchargers, produces about 350 horsepower, and this car is just magnificent. I have to say, of all the machines that are here this year, if I could choose one car to go out and race, this would be my choice.
Well, Alan, as that car did not finish its race, I hope you won't have to reach for your wrench before you grab your helmet.
Well, that's a part of the fun here at the Monterey Historic Races. These cars are driven, some of them quite hard, and occasionally they break down, but they keep coming back.
Listen to all that horsepower, Bob. Now we're getting to it. We're into mid-50s cars. You got a lot more power, you got a lot more snarl, and a good amount of grip.
John Mozart and the 58 Lister Chevy. You like these cars, don't you, Mike?
Yeah.
At Lister, leading Tom Hulfelder in a 61 Chaparral 1, and John Harden in a 58 Lister Chevy.
Many people, Bob, think this was the golden age of American road racing, when most of the cars were specials, and a lot of these were home built or built by cottage manufacturers before the big factories got involved.
Back at some of the black and white pictures of the classic road races at places like Watkins Glen and Road America, and you'll see cars like these.
18 is a Lister Jaguar. Lister was an English chassis manufacturer. Some of their cars were Jaguar powered, also in this race, number 2, 59, and 90, with Chevrolet small block power. And this blue number 97 is a Devon Roadster, a California chassis builder. They also built kit cars, Volkswagen powered or Chevy powered. Ed Dwyer, the driver.
Many of these cars being driven by their owners, but an equal number driven by hired drivers. You'll hear several of the drivers' names mentioned several times during the course of the weekend as they drive in the different classes.
Let's go on board with John Shirley in a V12 powered 57 Ferrari 250 Testarossa. Open cockpit car, big Nardi steering wheel, big in diameter for plenty of leverage. Tracking a Devon there as he works his way around the course. This was the very controversial pontoon fendered front end that didn't last too long. He grabs a gear.
Well, earlier, Mike, you and Alan DeCadenet got to pick your favorite cars. This would be one of my picks as one of the most beautiful cars ever built. Up ahead on the road, Mark Balestra driving a 59 Devon SS with small block Chevy power.
An interesting matchup, the California kit car against the one with the Italian pedigree.
In 1957, Ferrari launched what would come to be known as his 250 Testarossa series of prototypes. This is a 1957 car, and just have a look at this beautiful pontoon fendered front end. Scaglietti was the bodybuilder, and he did the most magnificent job. The early cars, of course, had drum brakes, because at that time, old man Ferrari didn't believe in disc brakes. But just have a look at this beautiful car. It is truly gorgeous. This particular example, however, is chassis 0666. It is the prototype. And Jesse, give me a hand here. We'll just take the bonnet off and have a look underneath, shall we? Well, there it is, the ubiquitous 3-litre V12 engine, and those red cam covers tell you all you need to know. Red head, Testarossa.
These cars have similar weight and horsepower, Bob, so this is going to come down to who's braver and who's got the best choice of gearing, it looks like.
You notice John Shirley has been shifting quite a bit in that Ferrari.
Well, he's got a higher RPM range to work with that overhead cam V12 than the pushrod V8 Chevy. But look at the torque the Chevy has.
Now plunging downhill. Remember, drum brakes in these cars.
But at that time, the drum brakes were really good. The disc brake hadn't evolved to where we see it now.
There are the current standings. We'll be right back to Laguna Seca. From the 31st Annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races, this safety update is presented by Haggerty Insurance.
This is a beautiful 1932 Alfa Romeo 8C Monza. And you can rest assured that whenever you see any old cars like this racing, they are much safer today than they were then, because safety then was not a consideration. There's a fire bottle down there, fire extinguisher. Very important to have. Here is the cutout switch for the electrical system, so you stop any fuel pumps. And most importantly, a fuel cell in here with reticulated foam. Now that stops any punctures that come in an accident, and also any fuel splashing about, which would be quite nasty when you look at this exhaust here, belching flame out. Look what it's done to the paint. Thank goodness there's no fuel about. A very important safety feature.
Welcome back. The class for 1957 to 1962 sports racing cars over 2,500 cc on track. I'm Bob Varsha with Mike Joy. A moment ago, you heard from Alpha lover Alan DeCadney.
Well, here's a case of big steam. John Mozart in the Lister Chevy catching up the number 15 Lister Jaguar of Nick Colonna. This is what 337 cubes will do for you.
And meanwhile, in 18th place, having started 19th, number 451, driven by Wes Abendroth, a 1958 Bocar XP5. Wow, talk about exotic names.
You've probably never seen anything like this. In the 1950s, a lot of people tried their hands at building limited production sports cars. There was Devin, Bill Thomas with the Cheetah, and Bob Carnes of Denver. One of his projects, the Bocar XP5, of which 11 were made with Triumph TR3A chassis and Chevy 327 V8 power. The fiberglass body wasn't bolted, it was bonded to the frame. The roll bars were standard equipment, as this was conceived and built as a dual-purpose car, appropriate for both road and track. It was, however, a little portly to compete with the sports racers of the days, and the nose aerodynamics created a lot of lift. Nonetheless, it's a fun car, and it is certainly unique.
And of course, it incorporates that big steering wheel. And there he is on track.
The quad headlights were a styling feature popular in Detroit at the time, so Carnes carried it over to this design as well. Somehow it looks fitting.
Absolutely. I don't care if it is portly. I think it looks nice. Meanwhile, back on board, number 1, John Shirley, still just ahead of Wes Abendroth now. He's chasing Mark Balestra, the number 77 of 59 Devon SS.
Still a lot of gearbox work by Shirley as he downshifts for the corkscrew, blind entry to that corner, quick flick, left then right, and he loses a bit of ground there.
Now here's the battle for 4th, and a great story. The 36 started dead last. That's Willie Green in a 1960 Dino 196S, passing John Harden in the 59, a 1958 Lister Chevy. A great drive for Green coming to the front.
Now here's a machine that really is a good old friend of mine. She's a 1960 Ferrari Dino V6 2.5-litre engine sports car made famous by the likes of the Rodriguez brothers, and then owned by the late great Rob Walker. Now she's being driven here by one of my old racing buddies, Willie Green. Now Willie, you haven't driven here for 16 years. I wonder what this car's going to be like.
Well, I shall have no excuses, I don't think. I've driven the car once at Silverstone. It's incredible, very responsive, very, very fast. For a 45-year-old car, I just can't wait to get on with it.
Well, before we go, I think, Willie, can you show us what's under the bonnet? Because that's also pretty important. There it is. Just look at that. A little V6 engine, single overhead cam, 3 twin-choke downdraft Weber carburetors, half of a Testarossa engine, if you like. But as Willie says, I think he's going to go like a rocket, and definitely one of the drivers to watch.
And he's had a great race, Alan. I mean, that little V6 Dino has given up nothing to the big Chevys.
Last lap battle for the lead. John Mozart in the 58 Lister Chevy and Tom Hollfelder in the 61 Chaparral 1.
The Chaparral, a very important car. Troutman and Barnes designed it. Led to the long line of Can-Am winners coming out of Jim Hall's shop.
Oh, we've got a big off there. That's Mozart, the race leader. Looks like he'll recover just fine, but as we were watching Shirley going around in that Testarossa, I was thinking, I'm sure all these drivers are acutely aware of the value of the machines they're driving. Here's another look.
Well, Bob, it's a tall order to run one of these at Song for 30 minutes. You know, the cars are vintage. The drivers aren't that young either, for the most part, but they give it their all, and that's the important thing, that these cars are being driven flat out.
Well, just listening to Willie Green earlier, you could tell the enthusiasm these guys have for driving these fabulous cars.
Checkered flag, and Hollfelder upholds the honor of the car that Harry Hoyer drove to the 1962 SCCA C-Modified National Championship.
Oh, man, where did you dig that up from?
Well, that was the Meisterbrow car. It was one of the first amateur race cars to run with commercial sponsorship.
And there you have it, folks. Looks like our friend John Shirley is going to lose that battle with Mark Balestra for 17. There's your top 5. We'll be right back.
V-Chip and you. Using the TV ratings at the start of every program, in conjunction with the V-Chip found in most newer sets, you can block the programs you find unsuitable for your family. And it's so easy to use. To learn more, visit this website or call the number on your screen.
No crunches ever.
Introducing the Ab Lounge, scientifically designed to get you up off the floor, making old-fashioned crunches a thing of the past.
Sculpt your abdominals using the Ab Lounge jackknife, proven in university testing to be better for your body.
It's as easy as a crunch, but the Ab Lounge design makes every move really count, targeting your abs without wasted effort.
Compare the Ab Lounge to an old-fashioned crunch. The advanced Ab Lounge jackknife generates up to 75% more muscle activity in the upper and lower abdominals, and an amazing 268% more in the love handle obliques.
I have this one pair of jeans. After just 8 weeks, my fat jeans don't really fit anymore.
With its rolled steel frame, the Ab Lounge supports up to 275 pounds.
And it's so easy, almost anyone can use it.
Call now to try the Ab Lounge for 30 days for just $14.95. If you don't agree the Ab Lounge is the best way to a sexy stomach, return it within 30 days for a refund of your $14.95.
Call now and say goodbye to crunches forever.
Welcome back to Monterey. Mike Joy, Alan DeCadney, Bob Varsha with you. One of the great things about the historic races is that every ticket gets you access to the paddock, where you can take pictures of your favorite cars and family.
Someday that little girl's going to grow up and find out what it was she was just leaning against. Here's a race we'll have for you in a moment. A field made up primarily of Ferrari GTOs. Where else would you find that? There's Tom Hollfelder, who won the previous race. Let's meet the runner-up.
Okay, John, we were just about to come round and congratulate you on the win, and we're here to say, hey, not a bad second. So what happened?
What's a lousy second? There is only a win. That's all that counts. Did a 360 in the dirt there, came right back on the track. I got my second, but, you know, hey, it's disappointing when you do that.
You'll be back next year.
I'll always be back next year, that's right. And I won't forget this one either, you know, so okay. Anyway. Yeah,
thank you.
Disappointing. Thank you.
Okay.
Good seeing you guys.
They always come back to Monterey. As the Ferrari GT class pulls out on track, getting ready for their moment of the sun, let's look back at the race for 1947 to 1955 sports racing cars under 2 liters.
An interesting mix of cars here, Bob, as you might find in a major endurance race like the 12 Hours of Sebring or the Daytona Continental. Quite a mixture of street cars and purpose-built race cars.
And one of the more interesting cars was the number 56, driven by certified racing legend Brian Redman. The car is a 1954 Oscar MT4.
If ever there was a giant killer amongst sports cars in endurance racing, it has to be this sweet little 1.5-litre engine Oscar. When Briggs Cunningham entered this car in the 1954 Sebring 12-hour race for Sterling Moss to drive, he thought with a bit of luck he might get a class win. Well, what with breakdowns and crashes and the like, the favoured Lanciers that were supposed to come first, second and third falling out, who crossed the finishing line after 12 hours? First, Sterling Moss driving this little car.
Redmond's also seen success at Sebring, and he drove this car to an inspired 6th place finish. The winner in this race, Bob, and it's no typo, this is a Cooper. A Cooper chassis with a Porsche engine.
Cameron Healy taking the checkered flag in that unique little car. Final results, Karim Marou finished second in a 51 MG TD Special, followed by Bill Perrone in a 1952 Oscar MT4. Television is really a Johnny-come-lately to the archiving of motorsports. For memories of the golden era, we turn to the world's great still photographers. And one is on hand this weekend at Monterey, Jesse Alexander.
Jesse, your photos have long been about fast cars and the men who drive them, but so much more. They just seem to be slices of racing life.
I feel that my images are exactly that, more about personalities and the what I call the extended family of people who were involved in racing in the 50s and 60s, and they're all my friends.
I'll go out on a limb, Bob, and say that Jesse Alexander was the preeminent racing photographer of the day.
Just fabulous stuff. And you had that quick look into the dark eyes of the late Jim Clark, perhaps Jesse Alexander's signature shot. Now let's take a look back at the race for the 1957 through 64 Formula cars. We'll take the fenders off for this one.
After a nice clean start, we found Rob Hall, number 17. That's a 1955 Lancia D50A-R.
Now here's a real joy to behold. A 1954 Lancia D50 Grand Prix car. Just look at those pannier tanks between the wheelbase for the fuel and this gorgeous color. Now Lancia weren't that successful themselves with these cars in 1954, but in 1955 the whole team with engines and the designer Vittorio Jana of Alfa Romeo fame were handed over to Scuderia Ferrari. The D50 Lancia became Ferrari's Grand Prix car.
This car is a recreation of chassis number 0004.
Now fans may be asking, Mike, why would a replica car, essentially a reconstruction, appear in an event like this?
Well, and there's great polarization of opinion on that, Bob, but I think if you use original materials and parts, as has been done here, the original car no longer exists, so you recreate it so that it can be seen and enjoyed. I'm okay with that, but I think replica is too harsh a term to use in a case like this.
It is essentially a very advanced restoration. And when all was said and done, the winner of the event, Tom Burns, driving a 1963 Cooper T62 Formula One car. Congratulations to him. Final results in the class. Behind Burns, Gregor Fiskin finished second in his 1960 Ferrari 246 F1 machine, followed by Terry Hefty in third in a 61 Cooper T53 Grand Prix car.
On track now, upwards of $200 million in assembled Ferrari 250 GTs and GTOs. Can't wait.
The 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races is being brought to you by Road and Track Magazine. And by Rolex. Rolex, a crown for every achievement.
Welcome back to Monterey, where you're riding right seat in Harley Cluxton's Ferrari 250 GTO, SWB short wheelbase coupe, LMB Le Mans Berlinetta, of which there are two in this race, a 3-liter and a 4-liter.
And you got just a little sense of that V12 howl.
This may be the greatest moment in vintage racing history, Bob. To assemble 18 GTOs and these other great V12 front-engine Ferraris on one track at one time in anger. Never before and maybe never again. And look at how hard they're racing, 3 wide into that corner. This is no exhibition. This is for real. I love it.
I mean, you almost can't take it all in visually. Look out! Oh, my. Now, considering the value of these cars, that was very close. But that is what is so outstanding about the Monterey Historic Races. These are races.
And some of these owners, drivers, and their mechanics have prepared for a full year for this one 30-minute race.
37 right there is Peter Sachs.
Now that's a 64 GTO, a very different evolutionary styling over the original 62 design.
And there's number 77 running 5th, Rodolfo Junco from Mexico, a 1960 Ferrari 250.
Not all of these cars have had fully pampered lives. This began as a rather mundane Ferrari 250 GT Coupe in 1960, but was crashed. The owner sent the chassis back to Ferrari for a full upgrade to GTO spec, save for the wet sump engine, and then to famed coach builder Drogo for a complete rebody. Drogo smoothed out some of the lumpiness in the original GTO design. This windshield we'd later see on the 275 GTB. It's much more laid back than the 250 GTO. A 5-link GTO competition suspension in the rear, and then a rather novel feature, one of the earliest uses of a hatchback that I've seen, done here to facilitate removal of the spare tire.
There were 4 Drogo-bodied specials in all, including one that was a result of a race crash against John Surtees and Jim Clark.
All part of the provenance of this great field. Now, this is the battle for 4th. The 37, as I mentioned, is Peter Sachs. 24 is William Connor. There are 2 cars numbered 24 in this race. We'll try to keep them straight for you. All this for 4th place, battling with Junco. Now, another player in that battle was Federico Kroijmans, and here's what happened to him in turn 9.
He's off the course. He better lock it down, or he's going to slide right up in front of traffic. Whew, safe.
And I know you're thinking what I'm thinking. Another very expensive close call.
There would be no inexpensive crashes here.
Battle for 4th continues. That's William Connor.
Vintage racing is carefully controlled, Bob. The drivers are strictly admonished that if there's any contact, they get black flagged, they go home, and they don't come back.
Back on board the other 24 in the race, Harley Cluxton running 16th.
Listen. Gosh, you just gotta love the roar of that V12.
Great stuff. Here's a look at the leaderboard. Vogeli out front. Carlo Vogeli in a 63 Ferrari 330 GTO. We'll be back. From the Monterey Historic Automobile Races, this moment in time is brought to you by Rolex.
In 1916, Dario Resta drove this then 3-year-old 4-cylinder Peugeot to victory in the Indy 500. 33 years later, vintage racing pioneer Lindley Bothwell acquired the car and brought it back to Indianapolis for a special exhibition. Bothwell lapped the Brickyard at 103 miles per hour, setting a Peugeot Indy speed record that still stands in late May 1949.
Welcome back. I'm Bob Varsha with Mike Joy and Alan DeCadenet at the Monterey Historic Automobile Races in Laguna Seca. This is the battle for FIA spec Ferrari GT cars. Carlo Vogeli still leads Ben Walton and the 22 of Tom Price, a 62 Ferrari 250 GTO.
And just as big a pitched battle right behind them, Junco trying to hold off Peter Sachs and Connor. Sachs to the inside. Oh, did they touch?
Whoa.
If they missed, it wasn't by much. I mean, this is really hard fought.
Gonna try him on the inside.
Got him. Sachs took the line away from Junco and powered on past. And here's 24, William Connor from Nevada, taking the long way around the outside. Now a tough way to pass.
He had some banking there at turn 5 to help him a little bit. So the order has changed. William Connor is now up into 5th.
Perhaps the most illustrious result that a GTO Ferrari got in big deal international competition was this car winning its class in the 1963 Le Mans 24-hour race, and in doing so coming second overall to a P1 rear-engine prototype. However, there is another GTO here whose illustrious racing competition also warrants investigation. So here's the car then. This is the second GTO Ferrari ever built. And it was entrusted by the factory to Luigi Canetti's North American racing team, who entered it in the 1962 Sebring 12-hour race for Oliver Gendebien and the great Phil Hill to drive. Well, they not only came second overall, but they also won their class in that race, the first ever victory for a GTO Ferrari.
Now let's watch the battle for 14th. Number 160 is Federico Kroijmans, who had that off at turn 9. The 122 is Bob Bowden, the 1960 Ferrari 250 GT short wheelbase. Harley Cluxton carrying our onboard camera also in that battle.
Cluxton taking a wider entry to this corner. Going to skip that first apex. No harm there. Catches the second one, trying to get a better launch off the corner.
He's being challenged by that silver GTO. That's Heather Mozart, wife of John Mozart, whom we saw go off track and finish second in his race earlier. So it's a family weekend for the Mozarts here at the Monterey Historic Races, and this is a tough battle.
Let's not forget, Bob, we've got 40-year-old race cars on the track here. Yes, they've been greatly maintained to a very high level. As Cluxton comes up, he's going to get alongside Bowden here. Tough place here to pass on the outside, though.
Mozart hanging in close, slightly banked there at turn 5, which catches the car and launches him up the hill.
And Cluxton should have him by the top of the hill.
Can't go too wide through there. Now the long pull to the top of the hill and then the plunge down the corkscrew. There's a look at your top 5. We'll be back in just a moment. From the 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races, this safety update is presented by Haggerty Insurance.
This delicious machine is a 1964 Elva Mark 7S. And it's got several safety features that would not have been incorporated in this car when it was new, like this rollover bar here, which is really substantial, with a diagonal here to brace it in case the car turns upside down. The driver's protected. And just have a look at this seatbelt, will you? This whole harness here, it's a 6-point harness, and it really keeps the driver snug in his seat. Those are all safety features that didn't exist then, that racing cars have today.
Welcome back. The battle continues in the FIA GT race between Ferraris.
Nick Soprano driving Jeff Pomorski's number 76. That's a 250 short wheelbase, the car that started the class. And right behind it, the number 16 of Joe Bamford. That's a 64 GTO, the car that ended it. You can see the evolution in design right there. And the 16 should be a little quicker. Diving to the inside, takes away the favored line, makes the pass.
That for 7th. And they're moving around John Shirley, who we saw earlier in the Testarossa.
But Bob, at the front, we're on the last lap, and this has been a great race and a great battle for the lead. It's not over yet. Carlo Vogelé has lost most of his lead to Ben Walton's number 7 as they come down the hill.
Using all the road and then some, as the saying goes. And look at that slide.
This is it. Checkered flag awaits. 2 more corners.
What will Ben Walton do? Under the brakes for turn 11.
He's eaten up the lead. Vogelé's going to have to really hustle here to hang on. It's all power here. 7,000 RPM, 12 cylinders, 300 some horsepower. Vogelé takes the checkered flag.
Walton finishes second. And what about our pal Harley Cluxton carrying our onboard camera? There he is.
Down the corkscrew.
And he will come home 16th, right where he started. Final results, Vogelé, Walton, and Sachs. fabulous sound from that V12. Now let's take a look at the class for 1955 through 1961 sports racing cars under 2.5 liters. A lot of Porsches, Lolas, of course, Ferraris, and Lotus.
In 1962, Phil Binks and his brother-in-law, George Kendall, built this car from a kit from Dolphin Engineering in San Diego. They powered it with a 1-liter pushrod Abarth motor salvaged from an Abarth Zagato that George rolled at Riverside. One of the two men has been racing it ever since. John Crosthwaite engineered the Dolphin. He'd previously worked for both Lotus and Cooper. He gave the Dolphin Lotus-style fenders and the Formula Junior nose, inspired by the Testarossa.
Now this 1961 Porsche RS61 owned by Tom Claridge reflects the FIA rules change for sports car endurance racing that year. It required production-style elements, including a taller windscreen, headlights, turn signals, and space for a suitcase. This car remains largely original, including its 1.6-liter Porsche 4-cam engine.
The winner, the 1500cc powered Lola Mark I, driven by Chris Orozco. From Monterey, dominated the last 2 laps and cruised to a lonely checkered flag.
Final results in class: Orozco first, followed by Dan Baker in his 1960 Porsche RS60. Third place, Eduardo Baptista in the 1958 Porsche RSK. Back in the paddock, you'll find a truly vintage soapbox derby car. If it has wheels and raced on pavement, you'll find it here at the Monterey Historic Races. But to be sure, it's the shiny four-wheel vehicles that draw most of the attention. In this case, a beautiful Lancia World Sports Car Championship contender. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Monterey Historic Races. Mike Joy, Bob Varsha, and Alan DeCadenet with you on this great weekend of vintage sports car racing. Jay Leno's here, Dan Gurney, Sterling Moss, Phil Hill, Derek Bell, so many luminaries of the sport and auto enthusiasts.
And a great bargain. Tickets start at about $45. Now let's look back at the race for the 1955 through 1962 GT cars under 2.2 liters. The class includes some real jewels.
You will be very hard pushed to find a happier band of racers than the Alfa Romeo Giulietta men. This year sees the 50th anniversary of these wonderful little 750 cars. And this black one, car number 69, was converted from a street car to a racer in the 1960s and has raced, would you believe, continuously for 37 years and clocked up 167 wins. And is as much loved today by its driver, Al Leake, as she was then.
Well, I was pulling for the little bug-eye Sprite, but at 850 cc's, it just didn't quite have a chance, but its driver had a lot of fun.
And here comes our winner to the line, Leonard Turnbull, the 1958 Porsche 356A, one of the classic Porsche models of all time. And finishing behind him, Alan Frick in a 61 Alfa Romeo SZ, and Robert Kahn in third in another 58 Porsche 356.
Let's also have a look at the 1955 to 61 GT cars over 2200 cc. This is what they call the Big Iron.
Mercedes-Benz, Austin Healey, Corvette, Aston Martin, and more.
In the 50s, it didn't take much to get a Corvette from the street to the track. Add a roll bar, fire extinguisher, and belts. Tape up the headlights, put on the right tires, the right brake linings, ditch the bumpers, and let's go. This is a 1958, a car ordered from the factory with the big brakes and the airbox ducting to the rear brakes. It has factory fuel injection and from the start was a race car. And a really neat touch, the number meatball. Signed by John Fitch, who got Corvette's first big win, and many other top vet racers of the day, including Gildstrand, Porterfield, Jeffords, Dick Thompson, Bob Bondurant, and more.
Now that is very cool. Here's Orwin Middleton, who came through to win in his 57 Corvette.
No substitute for cubic inches.
And another great engine note. Bob Patterson finished second in a 57 Vet. James Freeman third in a 1959 Aston Martin DB4 GT. Now, earlier today, a special exhibition of modern-day historic Ferraris took to the track at Laguna Seca. They included Michael Schumacher's winning Formula One cars from 2003 and 2001. They're all part of a special Ferrari program called Corsa F1 Cliente. Mike Joy got a closer look.
What's going to happen someday when we try to vintage race today's contemporary race cars? Well, here's a look. Ferrari's F1 Cliente division supports racing past Formula One Ferraris like these that are here at Laguna this weekend. It's more than just stacks of tires and boxes full of tools. This 01 car is almost state-of-the-art. And this is the 03 machine in which Michael Schumacher won 5 races en route to the World Championship. You can't buy parts for these, and you can't broker them, and I don't think many people could build them. It takes 2 engineers and 2 laptop computers interfaced with the car just to get it started and running. If you're going to want to vintage race one of these, you're going to have to do it through the factory.
And former sports car star Jim Busby is a part of the program.
F1 Cliente makes it possible for somebody who can afford to buy a car, and there seems to be enough of them, to buy a car and enter into a program that allows you to race from Spa, Monza, Donington, Laguna Seca now, a lot of wonderful racetracks. The best part about driving this car, particularly for an old guy like me who professionally drove for years with your standard H-pattern stuff, is it's easier. Now, having said that, they're a lot faster, a lot of acceleration, and the brakes are beyond belief. The lower speed cornering doesn't seem that much different to me than, say, an 80s Formula One car. But boy, when you get up into the medium to high speed cornering, there is nothing like it. The G-forces are, I'm not sure exactly what they are, but they are twice what I'd ever felt in, say, a Porsche 962 or even an 80s Formula One car or an Indy car. It's wonderful. The long and the short of it, it's wonderful and exciting.
And it's great to watch. In case you're wondering, being a part of the program starts at about $1 million. Now there's a big crowd awaiting something, right, Alan?
1969 Ferrari 312 Formula One car. It's going to be driven here by Pete Lovely, who's got about as much experience as anybody I know of driving cars. And isn't this a beautiful car? Cantilever front suspension, it's got a monocoque tub, a V12 engine, 4 valves per cylinder, and you look at this, the injections on the outside of the head, the exhausts are in the middle. And this is the first year they put this little wing on the back just to try and hold the back down. And of course over here we've got a 312 T5. Now this is one of Villeneuve's cars from 1980. Same principles, a monocoque, rocker suspension, but of course they'd grown this wonderful wing out the front by that time and stuck a much bigger and more effective wing on the back, transverse gearbox, and you could see which way Formula One was going. This car's not running with skirts, of course. When they had skirts, they really sucked themselves in the ground. But a V12 and a flat 12, they're going to make the greatest noise you've heard for a long time.
You said it. This is going to be the closest thing to primal scream you've ever heard.
Welcome back to Laguna Seca in Monterey, California. Vintage Formula One cars are headed out for the racetrack. From the 31st Annual Monterey Historic Automobile Races, this moment in time is brought to you by Rolex.
This 1953 Ferrari 375mm won at Nürburgring with Ascari and Farina driving, but it's best known for Phil Hill and Richie Ginther's runner-up finish in the 54 Carrera Panamericana, the Mexican road race. Carroll Shelby scored 2 later victories with it back in the States, and then it went into storage. When it emerged in 1995 for a full restoration, it was found to be amazingly intact, right down to the original tires. It appears today as it did in Mexico, November 19th, 1954.
And now on track, those beautiful Formula One cars. We're riding on the number 24, a rare Embassy Hill Racing 1975 GH for Graham Hill 1, starting 14th, driven by Sanehiro Dozaki from Tokyo, Japan.
Again, a wide range you'll see of mostly aerodynamic design and tire widths from 1967, which preceded the winged era up through 1980.
What a collection of Grand Prix cars, many of them with outstanding provenance, driven by some of the great Grand Prix drivers of all time.
Among them is Pete Lovely in the number 6 car. Pete won the very first major race ever held at this racetrack in the mid-50s.
Onto the front straight they come. The dominant engine of the day, or the era, the Ford DFV V8. But there are 12-cylinder Ferraris out there as well.
The big wing cars up at the front, as you would expect, because this was the era in which aerodynamics took over Formula One.
There are the names of the drivers in the top 6. Their cars: a McLaren, a Penske, another McLaren, a Ferrari, the Tyrrell. Bruce Canepa in a 1980 Arrows A3. Look at the difference in the aerodynamic treatment over the years.
Doug Marque from St. Croix in that City Corp number 28. Big air snorkel high up to get clean air, as the rules permitted then.
There's Bruce Canepa in that Arrows, moving up into second place.
Into the carousel, and whoa!
Waving that right front wheel.
That's a man who's incredibly brave, or who has an awful lot of laps on this track. Or both.
It's Canepa in second in the gold Arrows.
Bud Moeller in the Ferrari, on point.
Listen to this engine.
Third, fourth, fifth, then joined.
On board with Nozaki. This car handled over the years by, among others, driven by Formula One world champion Alan Jones, Tony Breese, Francois Migaud, and more.
Baker in the number 30. That's a McLaren from 1977. And another McLaren, number 19.
That's Dino Crescentini, 1972 McLaren M19C. Crescentini out of Carson, California. 3-liter Ford DFV, double overhead cam, 4 valves per cylinder.
The McLaren M19 Cosworth was a fairly typical early 1970s Formula One design, with a fully monocoque chassis, a Ford dual overhead cam V8 engine, which was a stressed member between the monocoque and the rear subframe. Transaxle design, all very typical, not terribly successful. Denny Holm drove one to third in the World Championship in 1972, but the car's best result came in South Africa with Peter Revson driving in 73.
And that was back when Formula One cars would be used in multiple seasons, a far cry from what we see in the current day.
Crescentini's made the pass on number 28, the Penske of Doug Marque, so he moves up a spot.
Now here's the battle for 16th, and notice the difference in the cars. This is Todd Marici, a 68 Ferrari 312, Pete Lovely, 69 312, and Don Edwards in a 72 Tyrrell 005. Look at those white exhaust pipes in the Ferrari.
And no wings. It's a little surprising to me that that car is able to stay ahead of the later design. Whoa, what's happened here to the number 7 of Todd Morrissey as Pete Lovely goes on.
Well, right on cue.
Didn't look like a wave by, Bob.
No? I wonder if he missed a shift or something. Riding in 13th place with Sanehiro Nozaki, just approaching the corkscrew. There's your top 5. Stay with us. From the 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Races, this safety update is being brought to you by Haggerty Insurance.
Before you get to drive on the street, you have to pass a written test and a practical test, and there's a lot more to it when you start to go motor racing. The very best piece of advice I can give anybody for safety: go and get yourself trained at one of those driving schools like Skip Barber's school, Bob Bondurant's school, Derek Daly's school, because then when you get out on the track, you'll know what you have to do to keep yourself safe and be safe for everybody else that's going to be using that track with you as well.
We go back on board with Sanehiro Nozaki. The Monterey Historic Races are an event known for their concern for safety, and that concern begins right at the top with event founder and promoter Steve Earle. And there is Steve battling for 6th place with Jeff Lewis in a pair of McLarens. As far as Steve Earle is concerned, the important thing about the weekend is that these beautiful cars leave in as good a condition as they arrived.
When you get into classic car racing or vintage car racing, whatever you want to call it, I mean, these cars are why we do this. They're valuable pieces of history, and we always say, look, you know, somebody else has already done the job with this car, whatever that history was, and we are at this point not going to rewrite that history. You're just going to become the guy who takes it off, you know, and puts it away, or maintains it and hands it on to someone else.
It's a little like the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm to anybody else's car or your own. And the penalty is dire for these gentlemen racers. You screw up, you don't get invited back.
The battle continues between Lewis in a 77 McLaren M26 and Earle in a 1976 M23.
Whoops. Oh, Crescentini's McLaren kind of emulating its original performance back in the day as he leaps to safety over the barrier. Tough break.
Didn't see any damage to the car, and I hope there wasn't any. There is your current leader, Dan Baker. Got a little bit of a gap now on Moeller, with Canepa now back in 3rd and chasing the Ferrari.
So it's McLaren, Ferrari, Arrows. Interesting matchup as we have a look at the Graham Hill car of Nozaki.
As you may have noticed, he even had Graham Hill's traditional helmet design.
Back in 1973, I had a great job being the team manager to the late, great Graham Hill. We built a shadow Formula One car for him. And by 1974, he built his own car, the GH1. Now, this is chassis 3, driven by Tony Bryce. And Mr. Nozaki has bought this car all the way from Tokyo, haven't you, Mr. Nozaki?
日本から持ってきまして、この車自体はカリフォルニアで買ったんですけど、それで何回かラグナセカで走ってます。
Well, yes, it is the Tony Bryce car, I think he said that. But are you enjoying yourself driving this car?
いや、もちろんもう十分楽しんでます。毎年楽しんでます。
He said yes.
And Alan, you did that all without subtitles. I'm impressed.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That Graham Hill helmet design I was talking about are those white paddles, emblematic of the London Rowing Club that Graham wore for many years.
I didn't know that. I thought it was reminiscent of like the Knights of King Arthur's days helmets.
Not London Rowing Club. His son Damon wore that same helmet design to his World Championship in 1996. Last lap. This is the battle for the lead. Baker, Moeller, and Canepa still running 1, 2, 3.
The Ferrari's got the power down the hill. Ooh, but he didn't have the line. He does now.
It's like he short-shifted coming down the hill. You heard that scream from the Ferrari, wheel to wheel.
Oh, if he hangs tight, the Ferrari's got the inside line at the final corner.
Oh, and Canepa looking for a way through as well. This could be a great finish.
Whoa! And the McLaren almost runs over the Ferrari out of turn 11.
To the line they come. And Dan Baker takes the win.
And that was nearly disastrous at the final turn.
And here's our friend Sanehiro Nozaki at the top of the hill, coming down the corkscrew. The elevator is going down now. He'll finish 12th. There are the final results. Baker and Canepa ahead of Moeller in the Ferrari. Stay with us. Coverage of the 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races is being brought to you by Hagerty Insurance. Hagerty, collector car insurance. And by BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
Monterey's a great place to have a look at classic cars in the paddock, out in the parking area, and on the roads. You wouldn't believe the array of machinery just driving to and from the track. A lot of spit and polish. Dan Baker's our Formula One winner. Alan's with him.
Dan, that was as good a Formula One race as we've had at Laguna. What a result in the end there.
I was barely able to squeak it out. It was, I was able to start pretty strong, and Bud snuck by me, and that Ferrari really pulls, and I think he started losing a little something on my visor, on my nose, but I was able to catch back up to him, and I was having a lot of push through 9. And unfortunately, I got a lot of push on the last lap, and Bud had me on the inside, and I thought I was going to go through with them together in 11, and coming out, I was trying to get a good run on him, and I think he missed a shift. So I just kind of dashed as quickly left as I could, because I didn't want to get up run the back by anybody else. But it was a lot of fun, and Bud drove really well. That Ferrari was right there, right till the very end. But you know, it's not a McLaren weekend, but it sure was fun and one.
Great. Well, thank you, and well done.
Well done indeed. Now let's take a look back at the race for 1962 through 66. Sports Car Club of America GT cars, featuring familiar names: Corvette, Cobra, Jaguar, and of course, Ferrari. Our Speed Channel colleague Derek Bell started on the outside of the front row in a Cobra Daytona Coupe.
Now, Derek's one of my all-time racing heroes, and I asked him earlier, did you race Cobras back then? He said, no, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it now. And he had a great battle against the lightweight E-Type Jag, the Cobra Roadsters, and that Ferrari prototype.
His car owned by Carroll Shelby, and you have to wonder what kind of advice Carroll might have given the two-time world champion Derek Bell before the race.
You don't give Derek Bell advice. You take Derek Bell's advice.
Derek, you were really getting to grips with this machine last year. Now, how's it all going this year?
Well, it does help this year. We happen to have brakes, and that makes a lot of difference in one of these cars. But we had a great second place last year, so you know the guys have worked on it a lot during the year, and it's a great privilege to get the opportunity to drive it.
Well, I spoke to good old Carroll Shelby, and he said that I told him you were driving one of his coupes. Oh, he said, him again? Well, don't let him hurt it.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, he didn't quite say that to me. He just said, this is your last chance to show you're a man by being able to master one of my cars.
Well, in fact, I know he's very pleased that you are driving it, because it's a great chance for one of his coupes to get itself exercised properly, as he put it.
Well, it does take some driving out. I have to say, it's not quite as easy as the sophisticated 962 or anything like that. It's quite a car, I have to say, and I admire the guys that used to race them years ago.
I love listening to Derek. He's the only person I know who can praise a car and pound it all in the same sentence.
That's right. Keep in mind how hard I'm having to work. At the end of the day, Rob Walton in his 1964 Ferrari 250 LM took the victory. But the battle behind was the one that caught our eye. Derek Bell squirming, as is his rival, off the final corner. That's Mac Archer in his 65 Cobra coming up the outside of the former world champion to take second spot. Great race. Yet another here at Monterey. Final results: Walton, Archer, and Bell of Ferrari heading home 2 of Carroll Shelby's best. And with that, we move on to the race for the 1962 through 1965 sports race cars.
I'm kind of surprised, because these cars were really thrashed when they were new, that so many of them have survived or have been recreated. This is a great turnout here.
In fact, it was one of the biggest fields of the weekend. Early lead being taken by the 23 of Chris Locke, the 65 Lotus 23B. But in the end, the 61 of Tom Burns, a 1964 Brabham BT8, took the checkers from 4th on the grid. Congratulations to Tom. Final results in the class: Chris Locke finished second after running up on the point early on. Don Anderson finished third in his 1965 Bobsey Porsche SR3. Out on the false grid, the FIA 1965 through 1974 prototype and GT cars are awaiting their turn. We'll be back for that race in just a moment. From the 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races, this moment in time is presented by Rolex.
When Riverside International Raceway opened, Dan Gurney was an up-and-coming young driver behind the wheel of a Corvette. But his drive in that Cal Club event caught the eye of car owner Frank Archiero, who installed Gurney behind the wheel of this Ferrari 375 Plus for Riverside's first SCCA National. Gurney responded, finishing a strong second to Carroll Shelby's Maserati. And the career of one of America's greatest road racing legends was off and running. November 17, 1957.
It was considered a kind of a beast at the time of 4.9 and liters. And I don't know, it was, you knew you had something that might get away from you, and it wasn't that super user-friendly, so you had to pay attention all the time.
30 years ago, this car was restored by a young man named Dave Willis. He raced it at the second annual Monterey Historics and sold the car soon after. Dave has come back faithfully every year since with other cars he has restored, but this year Dave was reunited with his very first historic racer. Now he and his wife promise to never let it go.
It's worth it for every 10 hours of total misery, of dragging cars around, laying underneath them, doing all this stuff. When you get out on the track, it's all worth it. It really is. And but believe me, it's a short 30 minutes when you're out there. But it is great, and it's a tremendous amount of fun. And the Ford is surprising. I haven't driven this car in 30 years, and it's easy to drive, fun to drive, and unbreakable. I did everything I could to make it fall apart, and it just ran like a top. So this will be retired to just my wife and I cruising around in the hills.
Look what's happened, Bob, in 60 years. We've gone from that 1914 Ford to this.
Time for a little fire breathing. These are the 1965 to 1974 FIA prototypes and GT cars, our last race of the day. We are on board the number 22 of Tony Swan, a 1975 BMW 3.5 CSL.
This is Rudge Cunningham's car, one of several that he brings each year. He's been a longtime BMW dealer and racer, was a great friend of the late Roger Ward's, and a great sportsman.
That BMW, I believe, was a Daytona winner.
Off and running, the red car, a Lola T70 Coupe on the outside, as everybody dive bombs for turn one. A Porsche sneaks to the inside of that BMW. That's a Ford GT just ahead.
We're going to try the outside. Listening for the shift points.
Still 2x2 here in mid-pack. This is hard fought on the first lap. And those 12-cylinder Ferraris working their way up through the field. There's a great representation of the 512s here. Tom Hohlfelder on the right in red and white stripes works his way up to the inside of Brian Barrington's Lola T70 Coupe. Oh, nice line by Barrington. He gets the jump coming off the corner and uphill.
Let's see if the Ferrari has the legs on the others. Coming up the hill, doesn't look like it right now. That's Jamie Mazzata in the bright yellow 1970 Chevron B16 in fourth.
Well, if you can hang on to Brian Redmond's rear wing, you are doing one heck of a job, because he races as hard now as he did 20, 30 years ago.
What have I found here at the Monterey Historics? One of my all-time favorite car and driver combinations, the Porsche 9083 and its driver, Brian Redmond. Brian, tell me all about it.
Well, the Porsche 9083 was a magnificent car built at the height of Porsche race car building, when they were racing and building 25 917s, 10 factory 908s, and at the same time in 1969 they built and designed this incredible 9083 built only for the Nürburgring and the Targa Florio. The Targa Florio, 44 miles to one lap, 900 turns, and the Nürburgring 14.5 miles to one lap with 170 turns, and so built only for those two races. This was Dr. Piech, Ferdinand Piech, who authorized this and pushed it through. The car is superb. It's one of my favorite race cars of all time.
Now you're going to be in the race with another great car that you know all about, the CSL that you in fact had a win at the Sebring 12-hour race and Daytona, of course. going to be a little strange going past that, isn't it?
Well, it's from a different era, and you can't compare a production-based car like the BMW CSL to a pure out-and-out prototype race car like this 908-3. And in 1975 and 6 with the BMW, we had tremendous success. The BMW Motorsports North America was formed in 1975, and the very first race, the Sebring 12 Hours, we won. The team manager, Jochen Nierpasch, got the drivers together before the race. Right, he says, Hans, to Hans Stuck, you will go out and break the Porsches. And he looked at me and he says, Brian, he said, you will take it easy and win the race.
Well, a great strategy and one that worked, and after all, you couldn't tell Hans Stuck to run half throttle anyway, could you?
Absolutely, nor Brian Barrington for that matter. Here he takes the lead from Brian Redman.
Well, is Redman employing that strategy? Did he let Barrington go?
Right now he's got Tom Hoffelder coming up right behind him in that big Ferrari prototype.
Yeah, but he didn't give him the inside there, Bob. So Brian Redman holds on to second behind Barrington's Lola.
From the 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races, this safety update is brought to you by Haggerty Insurance.
Back in the dawn of motor racing, the word safety hardly existed. You wore a flat cap backwards and a pair of spectacles, or if you were really lucky, you might get one of these, what they called a helmet, made out of leather, or this one seems to be made out of chicken skin. A pair of goggles to protect your eyes, of course, from stones. Today, it's all changed. This is a proper racing helmet to keep your head, and you've only got one of those, safe. Driving shoes that are flame-proof overalls, flame-proof gloves. Everything certified as being capable of protecting the driver from any kind of nasties that could happen to him or her in an accident.
Brian Barrington, a Lola T70 Mark III Chevrolet leading as Holfelder gets a bit wide coming off that corner with the Ferrari.
Think about that, a priceless race car, and he's working it that hard. Off that same corner, this is Chris McAllister from Indianapolis, Indiana, driving a 1969 Porsche 917K, perhaps the one car most closely associated with the great endurance races of the world.
Yes, it's a Porsche 917K. I was in the 1970 Brands Hatch World Championship sports car race when this actual car, chassis 016, won the race, driven by Leo Kinnunen and Pedro Rodriguez. But it was a very wet race indeed, and the clerk of the course, Nick Syret, was so surprised by Pedro's sideways motoring that he black flagged him into the pits. Well, as soon as Pedro heard what it was all about, he was livid. He squirted out the pits like the bat out of hell, completely sideways, and then put on a virtuoso driving skill that I have never seen in my life. Even though I was in the race, I couldn't wait for him to come by, just to admire how he could do it in those conditions.
That is still known as one of the great sports car drives of all time. And there is McAllister in that car. If you've ever seen Steve McQueen's classic Le Mans movie, you know all about the Porsche 917s. Up the hill he goes for his next meeting with the corkscrew.
Oh, around goes a Porsche 908. Oh, cement wall, and he just barely saves it. That was Michael Malone. Actually, it's a 910. It looks very similar to the 908. Pardon me for being excited, but that would have been a write-off if that had hit the concrete.
Here's another look. It's the right side wheels off, and then the back end gets away.
Can you say oversteer? It starts with P and ends with O-R-S-C-H-E.
And so fortunate to keep that car off the concrete. Well, he started 11th. He's a lot further back than that right now. Up front, 838, Brian Barrington in that Lola.
You know, I saw that car race, Bob, at Bridgehampton in 1967 and didn't realize it until I just saw it on the entrant notes, because back then it was a T70 Mark I, an open cockpit car designed for the U.S. Road Racing Championship, which became the Can-Am Series. A lot of them were converted to endurance spec like this one and made into coupes.
Back in 13th place, number 6, John Giordano, driving a 1970 Ferrari 512S. An absolutely gorgeous example of Ferrari's heyday in the World Sports Prototype Championships.
This 1970 Ferrari 512S is the poster car for this year's Monterey Historics. Was driven in the 24 Hours of Daytona by Jackie Eakes, then went to Monza with John Surtees, raced the Targa Florio with Vaccarella, and then was later raced by Ferrari privateer customer teams. Plenty of power from its big mid-engine V12, but no match for the Porsche 917s. Nevertheless, it's hard to imagine before or since a sports racer that was so brutish, yet so beautiful, all at the same time.
An absolutely fabulous car. And here it is plunging down the corkscrew. A reminder of the great days of Porsche versus Ferrari at places like Le Mans.
The lead battle is heating up, Bob. Here comes Redmond right back after Barrington to try and retake the lead. He's closed up the gap, had a look there, and out braves and out breaks Barrington in a turn.
Great stuff.
No surprise.
If you ever thought they don't race vintage cars hard, here is an example. Just flogging these priceless machines. Meanwhile, how's Brian's other ride doing? This is Tony Swan in the BMW.
He's giving Cunningham's car a good ride here. You know, again, in sharp contrast to the Ferraris and the Porsches, this car was designed to a rule book that said you must start with a production-based car. He's in 18th place, and the very familiar white with the red, blue, and purple signs of BMW Motorsport. That car was a thriller when it ran for the championship.
And right now he's got a piece of racetrack all to himself. There's a look at our current standings. We'll be back to Laguna Seca in just a moment. Promotional consideration provided for and a fee paid by the picturesque Bernardus Lodge, one of the Monterey Peninsula's finest destinations. The Monterey Historics draws enthusiasts from all around the world each year, spectators and participants alike. One entrant here for many years has been Dick DeLuna, who drove his 1917 Hall Scott to a 19th place finish.
Dick, of all the vintage race gatherings, what's so special about this one?
Well, all you have to do is look around the pits. There's probably one between this and Goodwood, probably two of the greatest gathering of race cars. And the difference here is they're being used. You can have something that's a Model T that's worth maybe $10,000 or a multi-million-dollar Ferrari, and everybody's running around the pits with them, and then gets out on the track and use them. People here really know their cars, and they use them. We have a great time. Camaraderie is tremendous.
And he's got an incredible car. You can hardly hear it running. It's powered by a World War I aircraft engine. It's all torque, no RPM, but boy, looks like fun.
I was about to say it sounded a lot like an airplane. Back to the battle. Brian Redmond and that Porsche 908 with Brian Barrington just off his gearbox in the Lola.
Well, and that's history revisited because the Lolas were no match for the Porsches in that day. In fact, then nothing was. Porsche owned endurance racing from about 1970 until they sort of gave it up. But boy, Barrington, whoa, almost runs out of room. That was a bold move. I don't know if it was a smart move.
Now that is racing.
Yeah, none of this, oh, I'll wave you by when you come up near me and then you wave me by if I'm faster. None of that BS. Brian Redmond is going all out.
Tom Holfelder still hanging on in third in that Ferrari 512. And he is followed by a pair of Chevron B16s in the hands of Jamie Mazzata and Robert Gregory. As a quick glance in the mirrors for Brian Redmond, let's go back a little bit further in the field. This is the 35 of Howard Matloff, 1970 Martin BM8, who started 16th. He's picked up a couple of spots. He's in 14th, battling with Tom Armstrong in that red 1966 Ford GT40 behind him.
And he just chopped Armstrong off at the carousel and almost took the nose off that Ford.
Matloff out of San Diego, California. You know, I've never seen a Martin before, but I bet Alan has.
Now, this is probably one of the rarest cars you're ever likely to see. It's a 1970 Martin BM8 made by Brian Martin, north of London in Buckinghamshire. I knew the guy very well indeed. It's definitely got some 917 Porsche styling characteristics on this car. It's Chevron-esque, it's Lola-esque, a 2-litre sports racing car. It's got a BDG 2-litre engine in the back of it at the moment. Now, Brian Martin also, and no one will remember this, built a 3-litre V8 engine, all of his own design. I remember buying one from him and sticking it in the back of a Valkyrie and tried to make a 3-litre prototype. It was a complete and utter total failure. However, I think the BM8 is going to go very well here at Laguna Seca.
And while Alan gets back to meeting everybody on the property, we'll get back to Howard Matloff, who remains in 14th place, although now he is being challenged by Tom Armstrong in that GT40. Armstrong with a quick nip, and of course with the big Ford V8 power, he is just simply going to overwhelm the Martin down that long front straightaway. Now, it's a heavier car, though. The Ford won't have the advantage in the corners. Well, back on board the BMW with Tony Swan. At the top of the corkscrew, he started 20th, currently 16th. Listen to that big straight 6. Battle for third. Hallfelder now in the Ferrari, being challenged by the yellow Chevron B16 of Jamie Mazzata. And there's Mark Innocenzi in the Owens Corning fiberglass Corvette, one of the Tony DiLorenzo SCCA championship machines. Hear that V12. Now to the battle for 8th. Joseph Di Loretto in an Alfa Romeo 33 TT. He started 11th. He's chased by Lawrence Bowman, a 65 Ford GT40. Smoke out of the back of that Alfa. Yeah, that's not olive oil. The GT's getting a windscreen full of 50 weight, most likely. And he's going to make the pass up the hill. No, he's not. Had the opportunity. Meanwhile, up front, Brian Redman, he better be checking those mirrors because Brian Barrington has come back to him. And the rules of engagement, I think, have been redefined since Barrington almost found himself up in the concrete a few laps ago. Coming around to begin the last lap. I have an autographed photo of Brian Redman in this car winning the Targa Florio. You know, I'm not surprised. I got a big one on my garage wall of Redman and Dick Barber's car at Sebring. Porsche, as a manufacturer, really did a great job of celebrating their race wins with posters that are available even today in their dealerships. But here's Barrington trying to keep Redman's picture off the poster this time. 1 lap to go. Either car have an advantage on the twisty infield bit here, Mike? Oh, the Porsche certainly. Lighter weight, probably better balance than the Lola, but the Lola has that big Chevy lump. Those Lola T70s, Mark Donahue had the most success in one, but Jerry Grant, Bob Bondurant won races in them, so did Dan Gurney, as they were open sports racers. Along straightaway, and that's where the Lola will have its best and perhaps only chance. Here's where Barrington got close to the wall a few laps ago. Yeah, he won't try that inside move again. Looks inside of the carousel, nothing there. It's all downhill and all power from here to turn 11. So we'll see if that big Chevy can propel Brian Barrington beyond. Starting to look like a smoky Porsche from Brian Redman, but he doesn't have to go a whole lot farther. Here comes the final corner. Barrington's got to be right up Redman's tailpipe to have a chance up the front straightaway. He's close. Oh, he almost lost it. And that will do it for Barrington, depriving us of what might have been a great drag race to the finish. He got on the gas just a little too soon. Great race. And for 5th place, William Cotter in the number 8 Ferrari against Chris McAllister's number 2 Porsche. The type of battle-off seen 35 years ago. Here we are again on the final lap.
Cotter will take the place over McAllister. So a terrific race with some priceless cars, won by a racing legend, Brian Redman. Stay with us. The 31st annual Rolex Monterey Historic Automobile Races is presented by Rolex. Rolex, a crown for every achievement. And by BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Welcome back. The crowd's doing a little last-minute shopping, and there is plenty to see in these kiosks, full of souvenirs, from T-shirts to model race cars, artwork to books, and a whole lot more. After a great race, it's time to meet our winner. Here's Alan de Cadenet with Brian Redman.
Brian, that was an amazing race. Now, your blood definitely came up to the boil on lap 5, I reckon. You've got the bit between your teeth.
Well, I mean, it was unbelievable, because this car, this 9083, should be a much better car around here than the Lola T70, which I drove, you know, for many years. But he's a young guy, and he's keen, and he's hot, and he's good. I mean, he never put a wheel wrong, under tremendous pressure from me. And then when he was behind me, he didn't put a wheel wrong. I mean, he was really good. I was very impressed. But he also has quite a bit of power.
Yes, well, it was a brawn over brains, I think, where the brains and the brawn, that's what I thought.
Yes, it's certainly very, very powerful. But this is a great handling car, and it's so light. I mean, it has to be 500 pounds lighter than the Lola, which is a huge thing, you know, on any track, on any corner. But he drove superbly. I mean, Jamie Mazzata and I, in the yellow B16 Chevron, before the race, I said, well, I'll sort of, you know, hang around for you, Jamie, and then we'll make a race with it. I was flat out from start to finish. It was unbelievable.
Well, no, it's a very fitting ending to a great weekend.
Yes, it's a wonderful weekend. Monterey, it's the best, perhaps, in the world, although Goodwood certainly runs it close. But a great, safe weekend, and wonderful weather, and a great crowd. Wonderful.
Thanks, Brian. Well done, Irving. Very lovely.
You know, it's fun to see the vintage cars, but it's fun to see the vintage drivers do well, too.
There are the final results. Brian Redman having to use all of his considerable experience and skills to keep Ryan Barrington behind him. A terrific race. Now it's time to start wrapping things up, and let's do so by going first to our man in the paddock, Alan de Cadenet.
You know, I really look forward to coming to the Monterey Historics every year. It's one of my favorite venues. We always have fantastic weather, great cars, great people, and great racing. And you know what, Bob and Mike? It's been a real pleasure working with you gentlemen this year. I'm so sorry you guys are stuck up there in the booth, but I just had a phone call from the missus. She wants me to pick up a quart of milk before I go home. So, hey, I'm going to cut out early. And I got a nice piece of kit to do it in, too. Bye.
With that stiff suspension, the milk will be butter by the time he gets it home. But safe travels, Alan. See you again soon. Bob, this has just been tremendous. Not just the breadth of cars and the numbers of them that are here, but the greatest gathering of GTO Ferraris on track perhaps ever. I'll tell you, I've got Ferrari fever full on again, and wow, this is just fantastic.
Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you are into automobiles, there are a precious few places and events that you must attend in your lifetime, and one of them is this one, the Monterey Historic Automobile Races. We hope you enjoyed our coverage. For Alan de Cadenet and Mike Joy, I'm Bob Varsha. So long, everyone.